In our special coverage today, the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement has concluded amid cautious optimism, marking a fragile pause in a devastating conflict. As discussions intensify in Cairo, mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the United States are working to determine the next steps in the multi-phase deal. The agreement, designed to secure a sustainable calm, has already enabled limited humanitarian aid and facilitated prisoner exchanges. However, tensions remain high. Israel reported bombing a site in Rafah in response to alleged rocket fire from Gaza. Meanwhile, international efforts continue, with the International Criminal Court investigating potential war crimes and the United Nations striving to improve conditions for Gaza's war-weary population. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has received a phone call from Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on Thursday. According to Egypt Today, the spokesman for the presidency, Ambassador Mohammed el-Shenawi, stated that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni exchanged views on regional developments during their phone call. The Italian Prime Minister expressed a keen interest in hearing President Sisi's perspective on Egypt's efforts to implement the Gaza ceasefire agreement and the Gaza Strip, facilitate the exchange of detainees, and ensure the delivery of sufficient humanitarian aid to alleviate the ongoing humanitarian crisis. Both leaders affirmed the importance of promptly initiating the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, while ensuring that Palestinians are not displaced from their land or that the Palestinian cause is not undermined. Arab leaders are preparing a unified response to U.S.-backed Israeli plans aimed at relocating Gaza's Palestinian population. Ahram Online stated that the strategy will be discussed at an Arab League summit in Cairo on March 4th. U.S. President Trump's proposal, which includes removing Palestinians from Gaza, has been rejected by Egypt, Jordan, and the Arab public, seeing it as ethnic cleansing. Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and the Gulf states, oppose the plan and are crafting an alternative reconstruction proposal. Egypt is leading the effort to present a plan for Gaza's rebuilding, focused on safe zones for Palestinians and long-term infrastructure restoration, while addressing governance post-war and challenging Israeli objectives. The National has stated that at a crucial moment for Gaza's ceasefire, Republicans in Washington are pushing to halt U.S. aid to the UNRWA. Despite increased private donations, Mara Kornfeld of UNRWA USA warns that funding freeze undermines efforts to stabilize Gaza. The U.S. has historically been the largest contributor, but funding has been blocked over allegations of staff links to Hamas. Progressive Democrats are pushing bills to restore funding, but with a Republican majority, prospects remain slim. Without U.S. support, she warns the situation risks worsening, affecting both Gaza's stability. In the wake of an extended ceasefire agreement in Gaza, Cairo has become the epicenter of intense negotiations to shape the next steps of the fragile truce. Meanwhile, tensions remain high as Israel launched airstrikes on Rafah, claiming a rocket misfire from Gaza. Amid these developments, international efforts to expand humanitarian aid continue, while the ICC presses forward with war crimes investigations in the region. And for more analysis, we are joined by Majid Boudin, an international law professor from Paris. Mr. Majid, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And let me first start by asking you about Trump's proposal of the U.S. control of the Gaza Strip under the pretext that it has become an uninhabitable place for Palestinians. What might be Trump's underlying motivations for proposing a U.S. takeover of Gaza?
Well, the Trump administration proposal is, first of all, it has to be submitted to the Palestinians themselves, because it's up to them to decide. And whether you have an excuse to say that the strip is not habitable anymore, it's a provisional situation. Means that the provisional situation cannot go for long. It doesn't affect the will of the people staying on the land. And this is a major point in international law. And it's up to the Palestinians to decide. Nobody can buy land from its population. Nobody can out people from their own land. So this is something, it's a right that cannot be negotiated. Mm-hmm. So, under international law, this proposal cannot be accepted. Why Trump is doing that? Trump is trying to make a deal. Whether he will find somebody who will make with help or not. But I believe that international law prevents the deal made
Yes, sir. Speaking of the international law, I would like to move on with you to the International Criminal Court's current investigation into the war crimes in Gaza. How is this progressing, and what impact might it have on future peace efforts, especially after the sanctions imposed on it by the Trump's administration?
Well, the world knows now that there are pressure on the International Criminal Court, but the International Criminal Court declared that it will not surrender surrender under the pressure. It will continue its work, and this is the honor of this court, of this international court, and so the investigation is continuing. Whether there is a pressure or not, the investigation is continuing, and the more the pressure is there, the more the will of the international court is to continue its work. And this is the real reason for why and for which the International Criminal Court was established, is to continue investigation by pressure. So investigation will continue, and it will be up now because it cannot stay for a longer time. We have sufficient evidence to go through.
Mm-hmm. Now, sir, since we're approaching the second phase of the ceasefire, which includes the complete withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces from the Gaza Strip, from here I would like to ask you, how might Israel's refusal to withdraw from the Gaza-Egypt border impact the ceasefire's second phase? Professor Majid, are you with me? To build on this, are you with me, sir? Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to a short break due to technical issue, and we will be back.
In a world of continuous change, Events are unfolding faster than ever. Q News cuts through the noise, bringing you objective, in-depth reporting on everything from politics and economy to culture and sports. Stay informed, stay empowered, stay with Q News.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we continue our discussion with Professor Majid. Professor Majid, welcome back. And I was asking you about the second phase of the ceasefire agreement, which includes the complete withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces from the Gaza Strip. And I would like to build on that by asking you, how might Israel's refusal to withdraw from the Gaza-Egypt border impact the Gaza ceasefire second phase?
Well, the withdrawal is an obligation made under the ceasefire agreement. So Israel has to implement this obligation because international agreements are meant to be respected. This is the rule of pacta sunt servanda, which is a principal rule in international law. Second, under international law itself, whether there is an agreement or not, Israel must withdraw. So for all these reasons, Israel has to withdraw, but if Israel doesn't withdraw, it will jeopardize the whole process of the ceasefire and of building any peace process in the Palestinian territories, and particularly in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Now, in light of Trump's proposal to relocate Palestinians according to international law, why is annexing considered a violation of it?
Because there is a principle under international law, which is that the population, the people of Palestine, must decide of their future. Mm-hmm. And so this is a rule which is not, which cannot be violated. Mm-hmm. So nobody can decide instead of the Palestinian people. And any decision which is taken without the decision of the Palestinian people is null and void. Now, Trump is trying to make a transaction. Or this transaction, he must find another partner. The partner must be the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are not accepting that, and they have declared that. Second, the Palestinian people cannot even decide on this point against their own rights, because their own rights cannot be sold out. They have the land, they are owners of this land, they are inhabitants of these lands, and they must stay in their land. Whether it's destroyed or not destroyed, whether it's destroyed, they can find a technical way to rebuild the country where the people are there. They can be removing, they can go from a place to another to allow the building of the country. The country is very easy to build. In few months, the country can be rebuilt in a better way. Now, the international community must stand with the Palestinians to rebuild Gaza and to turn the page, and through a political solution. And then now when we see all the Arab countries, the surrounding countries, Egypt, Jordan, the Gulf countries, all the Arab countries are refusing also that. And Europe is refusing this this proposal. So we
Now,
have seen.
sir, sorry for cutting in, but joining us, Dr. Muhammad Osman, International Relations Specialist from Cairo. Mr. Osman, thank you so much for joining us on this special coverage. And let me first start by asking you, what are the potential consequences of the proposed takeover by Trump for regional stability in the Middle East?
Thank you, Salma, for having me. Of course, the Trump propositions of taking over the Gaza Strip are nothing short of ridiculous and a recipe for perpetual regional instability and absolute chaos and pandemonium in the region. If President Donald Trump wants to ensure that this region will remain in a state of conflict and instability for the next 50 years, then he should try and proceed with his the displacement schemes that in which he intends to turn Gaza into the so-called Riviera. In actuality, he will turn the entire Middle East, including Israel, into what he called, what he threatened the Palestinians with before, which is hell, basically. So these propositions go way beyond international law. They contravene international law. They contravene UN resolutions. They contravene the entire basis of the Palestinian-Israeli peace process that requires the establishment of a Palestinian state, a two-state solution on the premise of an Israeli state and a Palestinian state on the 4th of June 1967 borders, which includes the entirety of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, which should definitely will not be supplanted by an American-sponsored Riviera. This was never in the Oslo Accords or in UN resolutions or in the basic common sense even. So I think that it's detrimental, and I think that the rejection of the Arab world, primarily Egypt, of course, of this scheme has mainly signed its death warrant, meaning that this scheme will never succeed, and that Egypt and all the Arab countries will do whatever it takes in order to prevent it from transpiring, and the international community as well refuses it utterly. The European Union, China, most of the global south, the African Union, the majority of African countries, Russia, so everyone is against it, basically.
I would like to build on this point with Professor Majid regarding the international community's response. Professor Majid, what was the International Court of Justice ruling regarding Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory?
Well, the International Court of Justice made the international community remember that international law is saying that Israel is the occupation authority, and as the occupying authority, it had the obligation to withdraw from all Palestine. It means from the West Bank, from Gaza, and from West Jerusalem. And this is the ruling, the last ruling of the International Court of Justice in the case made by the provision measures made by South Africa. And this ruling is binding on the international community. Now, how we are going to react to this, we have seen that the Trump administration has retaliated against South Africa. When this is in the diplomatic arena, it's usual. But if the international community, the Palestinians, the Arab world, and the United and Europe and the European Union and other countries in the world will stand against this occupation and again this proposal to clean out the people of Gaza from Gaza, Trump will change his proposal. He has said lately that it was just a proposal, it was not a plan. And so Trump is doing like that. He's gambling in his deals diplomacy and his diplomacy of deals. So we have to understand this way of doing diplomatic business. And we have to understand that we have always to keep all proposals based on law. while Trump is basing all his proposal on deals. This is the major difference. If we understand that deals cannot be, that the future of countries cannot be made by deals, but only under international law, and which is the fundamental basis of any proposal, then Trump will come back to a reasonable position when we ask always to make application of international law.
Yes, sir. Now moving back to Dr. Osman. Dr. Osman, with the completion of the first phase of the ceasefire, how do you interpret the Israeli occupation forces striking Rafah at this critical time before the second phase?
Of course, it's an attempt to blatantly spoil the current ceasefire agreement. Israel has been forced into signing this ceasefire agreement. They were not convinced that they should have ended the war. However, the Trump administration, before it even assumed office, forced their hand down through Stephen Witkoff, who said that you have to sign this agreement because President Trump has to have good optics while walking into the Oval Office in the White House, and that he should score an early foreign policy win, and in return we will give you a free hand, apparently, inside the West Bank, and also we will make very favorable terms for the settlement of the war in Gaza to the interests of Israel. And Trump is delivering on that front, unfortunately, and he's not placing enough constraints on Israel. Now that his bid, at least temporarily, has failed to enforce the displacement scheme inside the Gaza Strip, so now he's placing less pressure on Israel with regards to their compliance to the ceasefire. Therefore, they are very rigid in their negotiation with the Arab mediators, especially Qatar and Egypt, with regards to the negotiation for the second phase of the agreement. And apparently now there is a proposition to prolong or extend the first phase of agreement because basically the agreement, the first phase expires tomorrow and we do not have a second phase that has been agreed upon yet. And with the absence of a second phase and without the extension of the first phase, we face the danger of descending back into war. So the Israelis are pushing for an extension, and I think probably there will be an extension of the ceasefire because Hamas is in no shape to engage once again in an open war with the Israelis. But so far, Hamas has declared that they oppose extending the first phase of the ceasefire. However, it seems that the sources at least say that it seems that the negotiating teams in Cairo, yesterday, the Egyptian government, through the State Information Service, has announced that there are Israeli and Palestinian delegations and Qatari delegations in Cairo to negotiate for the second extension of the second phase, the first phase of the ceasefire, and for starting negotiations on the second phase of the ceasefire. So I think that we are approaching an extension. However, I believe that without substantial U.S. pressure, within a few weeks, we will descend back into war after Israel secures the release of all, if not most, of its detainees inside the Gaza Strip.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the United States building more on Trump's plan to relocate Palestinians with Professor Majid. Professor Majid, following the international wave of criticism in response to this plan, could Trump's plan potentially lead to European Union sanctions against Israel?
Well, sanctions is another matter. Mm-hmm. But this is possible. But for the time being, the Europeans always are looking for diplomatic solutions. But here, the Europeans are very clear. They want to have solution on the base of international law. This is different from what Trump is doing. Trump is trying to make a deal. And the deal is like a real estate deal. Just give me this piece of land. I put out the people. I will build, make some buildings, and then I will sell it or whatever. And this doesn't work under international law. This is a transaction, and people cannot make a transaction on their own land. And here, the best thing that to secure the application of international law, the Palestinians must be represented by real representatives, not by Hamas. Hamas is not accepted by the international community. It has no legitimate representation. You have seen when Trump wanted to destabilize Zelensky of Ukraine, what he did. He said Zelensky is a dictator. He was not elected. So, and when he reached a deal with Zelensky, then he said, oh, he has forgotten about what he said. He doesn't remember. But for Hamas, it's a serious issue. They are responsible of what's happening to Gaza for a certain extent. And now the Palestinian people must be represented by a different component of the Palestinian political arena. And like also Lebanon cannot be represented by Hezbollah. It must be represented by the state of Lebanon. There is a president of the republic, there is a prime minister. And like in Syria, they must be represented not by an Islamic government, by a different government composed by different components of the Syrian society, which is very rich of different political moderate people. And this is a matter of urgency for the region, for the three states, for the three populations, because the international community, they want that these people are being represented by sound people, legitimate people. So
Sorry for interrupting you, sir, due to the shortage of time. That was Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, and Majid Boudin, an International Law Professor. Thank you both gentlemen for your insights. And this brings us to the end of our special coverage for today. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time as we explore more on the Middle East evolving landscape.